have you ever thought about what it means to live a life that's just on fire? I mean, a life so full of passion and purpose that it burns itself out in less than 30 years, but somehow its light just keeps going for centuries. Well, today, that's exactly the kind of story we're getting into. We're talking about a man who was the very definition of that kind of fire.
Just wow. Oh, that I were a flame of fire in the service of my God. That one sentence right there is pretty much the whole story. It's this raw, passionate cry from a guy named David Brainerd. So the big questions are, right, who was this guy? And what does it actually cost a person to live a life like that? Let's find out.
Okay, so let's get right into it. The man and his struggle. We're talking about David Brainerd. Now, he was born way back in 1718 in Colonial, Connecticut. And right from the get-go, his life was this huge, difficult contradiction. It's what makes him such an unlikely messenger for anything, really.
So here's the central conflict of his entire life laid out right here. On one side, you have this incredibly deep, this unshakable calling he felt inside him. He was absolutely convinced he was meant to go out to the frontier and evangelize the Native American tribes. But on the other side, you have his reality. The guy was battling tuberculosis his whole adult life. And on top of that, he was dealing with what he called melancholy, which for us today, we'd recognize as just this crushing, severe depression. So this immense spiritual drive is at war with this profound physical and emotional suffering.
And look at how short his life was. I mean, the timeline is just wild. He's born in 1718, has this life-changing conversion experience at 21. By 24, he's already started his mission. And just a few years later, in 1747, he's gone. That's it. His whole life's work, everything we're talking about, is packed into this tiny, incredibly intense window.
29. Just let that sink in for a second. 29 years old. Everything he did, all the suffering he went through, the entire legacy that we're about to unpack, it all came from a man who didn't even make it to his 30th birthday. It's just staggering when you think about it.
So what was this mission actually like on the ground? Well, you can probably guess it wasn't some cushy job. It was a mission forged in tears, all about sowing in hardship. In fact, his work was so tough, so full of struggle, that he found himself clinging to this one particular idea from the Bible that just seemed to perfectly sum up his entire life. And this is it. This verse from Psalm 126 was basically the soundtrack to his life. He that goeth forth and weepeth, bearing precious seed, shall doubtless come again with rejoicing, bringing his sheaves with him. You see the idea here? It's that the good stuff, the harvest, the rejoicing, it almost always starts with pain and hard work, with weeping. And for David Brainerd, man, that weeping wasn't just a metaphor. It was very, very real. And when I say it was real, I mean it. Think about the reality of his mission. He's preaching to the Delaware and Susquehanna tribes, out on the raw frontier. He's enduring extreme cold, just brutal conditions. He's always sick. He's deeply, painfully isolated and lonely. But you know what's almost worse? The internal battle. You read his diary, and it's just page after page of him feeling useless, like a total failure, completely unworthy of his own mission. The fight was on the outside and the inside.
And this all boils down to this key idea: sowing with tears. This was his whole approach, his entire method. Again, not just a nice phrase. He felt this crushing weight, this burden for the people he was ministering to, so much so that he would literally spend entire days just praying for them, often weeping as he did. That was his work.
Okay, so a story filled with this much sickness, depression, and struggle. You'd be forgiven for thinking it's going to end in total failure, right? But that is not what happened at all. Just when things seemed their worst, there was a breakthrough. It was like a harvest suddenly appeared in the driest, most barren land imaginable.
And this gets us to the absolute core paradox of David Brainerd's life. It was in his weakest moments, when he felt the most useless and discouraged, that he saw the most incredible results. It's wild. Despite all that suffering, tons of people had genuine conversions. And the key thing is, it wasn't because he was some amazing charismatic speaker. It was God's strength working through his weakness.
And you don't have to take my word for it. Listen to this. This comes from a tribal chief who converted. He said, "We are like dry trees, but the word of God has made our hearts like trees full of sap." I mean, how beautiful is that? What a perfect way to describe that feeling of going from spiritually dead to being full of life. It just shows you the kind of tangible impact Brainerd's work was having.
But hold on, because here's where the story takes a really unexpected turn. You'd think that's the end of it, right? A short, hard life with some surprising success. Nope. Brainerd's biggest impact, the thing that really cemented his legacy, happened completely after he died. That short, painful life was about to ignite something huge.
So how on earth does that happen? Well, it's a three-step process, really. First, the diary. Before he died, Brainerd gave his private journals to a pastor named Jonathan Edwards, who was basically a superstar in colonial America. Second, Edwards reads this stuff and realizes how powerful it is. He edits it and gets it published. And third, that book becomes a runaway bestseller, a missionary classic that just lights a fire under a whole new generation.
And when we say it inspired a new generation, we're not talking about just a few people. We're talking about giants. People like William Carey, who's called the father of modern missions. He said Brainerd's story was what pushed him to go. Henry Martin, a pioneer missionary to India and Persia, said the exact same thing. Brainerd's diary literally became the instruction manual for what it looked like to live a life of total dedication.
Okay, so this is a 300-year-old story. Why are we talking about it today? What can we actually learn from this flame of a man? Let's break it down into the key takeaways.
I think there are three big lessons we can pull from his life. First, burden matters. That deep sense of purpose, that concern he had for other people, that's what got him through everything. It was a powerful, powerful motivator. Second, prayer is essential. For him, prayer wasn't just something you did for a few minutes. It was the absolute engine of his entire mission. And third, and this might be the most powerful one, God uses weakness. His life is proof that incredible, world-changing impact can come directly from our struggles and our feelings of not being good enough.
So, we started with that question, right? What happens when one life burns with this kind of holy urgency? Well, I think David Brainerd's story gives us a pretty clear answer. It shows that when a single life, even a life that's short, full of pain, and lived in obscurity, when that life burns like a flame of fire, its light can echo for centuries. It really makes you stop and think, doesn't it? What kind of fire are we trying to build in our own lives?